Have you ever worked with someone you couldn't stand? Now imagine that on the biggest basketball stage in the world with millions watching. Two geniuses, two egos, one ball. Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant couldn't stand each other, but together they built one of the greatest dynasties in NBA history. In 1996, the Los Angeles Lakers made two franchise-defining moves. They signed Shaquille O'Neal, the most dominant center since Wilt Chamberlain, and traded for a 17-year-old prodigy named Kobe Bryant. Two generational talents, two alpha competitors, and two unstoppable forces on a collision course. What looked like the start of a golden era quickly turned into a ticking time bomb. But what happens when chaos works, when hate becomes fuel? From 2000 to 2002, the Los Angeles Lakers weren't just winning games, they were rewriting the rules of domination. With Shaquille O'Neal in his physical prime and Kobe Bryant on a meteoric rise to superstardom, the Lakers became a force that didn't just defeat opponents, they overwhelmed them. They controlled the paint, the perimeter, the tempo, and most importantly, the scoreboard. They didn't just win, they crushed. The numbers tell part of the story. 3 consecutive NBA championships, 2000, 2001, 2002. 4 NBA Finals appearances in 5 years. Shaquille O'Neal winning 3 straight Finals MVPs, averaging over 35 points and 13 rebounds per series. A young Kobe, just 21 years old, emerging as a lethal scorer and elite defender, already playing like a seasoned assassin. Off the court, their relationship was messy, often combative, full of subtle jabs and not-so-subtle power struggles. But once the ball was tipped, there was a strange harmony in the chaos, a chemistry forged not in friendship, but in sheer competitive fire. Shaq was brute force. Kobe was pure skill. One was thunder, the other a blade. That contrast made them unstoppable. Shaq bullied his way through defenders, dunking with such force that the entire arena would shake. His size, speed, and footwork made him unguardable. The moment he caught the ball in the low post, it was over. Kobe, meanwhile, operated like a surgeon. His footwork was textbook, his mid-range jumper deadly, and his confidence unshakable. If Shaq overwhelmed you, Kobe sliced you apart. They were opposites, and that's exactly why it worked. Take the 2001 playoffs, for example. The Lakers went 15-1, one of the most dominant postseason runs in NBA history. They swept the Trailblazers, they swept the Kings, they swept the Spurs, a team many thought could end their reign. Only Allen Iverson's Philadelphia 76ers managed to steal a game in the finals, and it took a 48-point miracle performance in overtime to do it. The message was clear. This team wasn't just better, it was operating on a different level. Every possession felt like inevitability, every quarter a demonstration of power. No one could keep up. Kobe, still in his early 20s, put up 48 points and 16 rebounds in the 2001 closeout game against Sacramento, then 45 points in Game 1 of the next series. He was making the leap, not just to all-star status, but toward the all-time great conversation. And Shaq? He was a destroyer, the most dominant physical force the league had seen since Wilt Chamberlain. When he caught the ball inside, defenders braced for impact, not to contest, but to survive. The fear was real. Teams entered Staples Center already defeated in the mind. Coaches admitted they had no answers. Opposing stars, even Hall of Famers, simply hoped to avoid embarrassment. By 2002, it wasn't, can you beat the Lakers? It was, how long can you delay the inevitable? No double team could stop Shaq. No defensive rotation could keep up with Kobe's footwork. They attacked from every angle, inside and out, power and finesse. And when they were in sync, it was beautiful violence. But it wasn't just talent.
It was pride. It was rivalry. It was tension turned into motivation. They didn't like each other. They didn't trust each other. But when the game started, they didn't need to. Shaq and Kobe communicated through execution, through timing, through an unspoken understanding that no one could match them, especially not when they were both locked in. They fed off the chaos. They made dysfunction work. And that's why this wasn't just dominance. It was a spectacle. It was a reign of controlled destruction. For 3 straight years, the Lakers weren't just the best team in basketball. They were the standard, the dynasty that every other franchise feared and studied. It was power and precision, raw force and refined skill. It was a young legend and a force of nature. It was the beginning of a complicated, combustible, and unforgettable era. This was absolute dominance. And it all started with 2 men who couldn't get along, but couldn't stop winning together. Winning doesn't always bring people together. In the case of Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant, winning only amplified the divide. With every championship, every banner raised to the rafters of Staples Center, the space between the 2 superstars grew wider and colder. What started as a creative tension quickly evolved into open hostility. Their personalities, values, and leadership styles couldn't have been more different. Shaq was the veteran, charismatic, larger than life, comfortable in the spotlight, and unapologetically confident. He saw basketball not just as a career, but as a lifestyle. He worked hard, but played harder. His humor disarmed the media. His size terrified opponents. Kobe, on the other hand, was intense, obsessed, unsmiling. At 21, he already had the work ethic of a man possessed. He'd wake up at 4 a.m. to train alone. He studied Jordan. He studied Hakeem. He studied greatness and modeled his entire life around surpassing it. Shaq wanted dominance. Kobe wanted immortality. That difference tore them apart. And the more they won, the louder the silence between them became. The tension wasn't subtle. It wasn't hidden behind closed doors. It was public and intentional. Shaq mocked Kobe during interviews, making sarcastic comments about team players and taking shots at Kobe's shooting choices. Kobe returned fire, often pointing to Shaq's lack of conditioning, his tendency to coast during the regular season, and his refusal to hit free throws. This wasn't passive-aggressive behavior. It was war through microphones. The media, of course, ate it up.
Headlines exploded. Shaq says Lakers need to pass more. Hints at Kobe. Kobe responds, some guys just don't want to work. Shaq, I'm the reason we win rings. Kobe, he's jealous I'm taking over. It was drama unlike anything the NBA had seen. It felt like a soap opera unfolding in sneakers. And the locker room, a battlefield. Veterans like Derek Fisher and Rick Fox often had to play peacekeeper. Phil Jackson, a master psychologist as much as a coach, did what he could to keep them from imploding. But even he admitted the challenge was unlike anything he had ever faced. He once described coaching them as driving a car with 2 steering wheels and no brakes. That wasn't hyperbole. It was survival. There were shouting matches, blame games after losses, cold stares after victories. One infamous incident nearly turned physical during a practice. Punches were inches away from being thrown before teammates separated them. This was not chemistry. This was combustion. And yet, somehow it worked. It was dysfunction, but highly functional. Hate, but with results. They weren't friends, a teammate would later say. There was no warmth, only respect and resentment. Shaq saw himself as the face of the franchise, the anchor, the MVP, the reason banners were going up. He believed Kobe needed to wait his turn. Kobe, meanwhile, wasn't interested in waiting. He believed Shaq was wasting potential, squandering greatness by refusing to commit at the level Kobe demanded of himself and everyone else. To Kobe, good enough wasn't good enough, even if it meant 3 rings.
To Shaq, Kobe's seriousness bordered on arrogance. He called him a ball hog, said he needed to trust his teammates, and accused him of trying to run the show too early. Their relationship became a chess match of subtle insults and ego-driven power plays. Posters with both their faces covered LA, but in reality, they were building separate legacies under the same roof. 2 kings, 1 throne. 1 city, 1 team, and no intention of sharing. Phil Jackson wrote in his memoir that coaching Shaq and Kobe was unlike anything he had experienced, even with Jordan and Pippen. He called the environment toxic, and yet marvelously productive. He compared it to Greek mythology, 2 gods constantly battling for Olympus. It was chaos, and yet it was working. The fans loved the wins, the front office loved the revenue, and the NBA loved the storyline. But the clock was ticking. Even dynasties built on greatness can collapse when pride outweighs purpose. And for Shaq and Kobe, every ring they earned brought them closer to the moment where it would all finally fall apart. And deep down, they both knew it. They were on top of the world, but the world underneath them was crumbling. Even in the afterglow of their 3rd straight championship, the Los Angeles Lakers were burning from the inside out. The banners hung proudly at Staples Center, the rings glittered on their fingers, but the locker room had become a war zone, silent, cold, and volatile. By 2003, the dynasty was showing cracks. And then, everything exploded. Kobe Bryant, 24 years old and at the peak of his fame, was suddenly in the eye of a storm, accused of sexual assault in Colorado. What followed was more than just a legal battle, it was a public reckoning. Helicopters followed his every move. News outlets dissected every word he spoke. The NBA, the Lakers, and the world of sports watched in stunned silence as one of the league's brightest stars was thrust into chaos. On the court, Kobe still showed up. On the road, he flew back and forth between courtrooms and arenas. One night, he'd be in a courtroom. The next, dropping 35 points in a Lakers jersey. But the emotional toll was unmistakable. And while Kobe was fighting for his name, Shaquille O'Neal saw opportunity. He used the moment to leverage power. Shaq publicly demanded a contract extension, saying the team should pay him what he was worth. Privately, he was frustrated that Kobe, amid scandal, was still garnering more media attention, more fan support, and more control within the franchise. The divide between them, once just ego, had now become existential. One was battling the courts, the other was battling for the crown, and the franchise was caught in the crossfire. So the Lakers made a move, one last attempt to salvage the dynasty. In the summer of 2003, Los Angeles assembled a super team, signing Hall of Famers Karl Malone and Gary Payton, 2 legends in search of the one thing missing from their careers, a ring. On paper, it looked unstoppable, a 4-headed monster, experience, power, finesse, and hunger all in one lineup. The mission was clear: win a 4th title, cement the dynasty, heal the wounds. But wounds don't heal when they're still open, and resentment doesn't fade in silence. As the 2003-2004 season unfolded, it was clear the talent was there, but the chemistry was not. Karl Malone got hurt. Gary Payton struggled to adapt. And in the background, the same Cold War between Shaq and Kobe continued. Phil Jackson returned to coach, but even his Zen philosophy couldn't neutralize the toxicity that had metastasized over the years. In his own words, the environment was uncoachable. Still, somehow, they reached the NBA Finals, one last dance against the Detroit Pistons. The Pistons had no superstars, no egos, just a team, a unit. They didn't beat the Lakers with talent, they beat them with trust. Detroit won the series in 5 games, decisively, effortlessly, brutally. For Shaq and Kobe, it was more than just a loss. It was the end. The moment the final buzzer sounded in Game 5, the dream was over. The Lakers dynasty, 3 rings, 4 finals, years of glory, collapsed not at the hands of a better team, but under the weight of its own self-destruction. The post-mortem came quickly. Phil Jackson left the team, calling it the most emotionally draining season of his life. Shaquille O'Neal, the face of the franchise, was traded to the Miami Heat. Kobe Bryant, now alone, re-signed with the Lakers, becoming the centerpiece, the storyline, and the future. Just like that, the most dominant, dysfunctional duo in NBA history was no more. The breakup wasn't mutual. It was surgical.
Shaq would go on to win a title in Miami with Dwayne Wade. Kobe would eventually rebuild, reclaim, and rewrite his legacy in Los Angeles. But no matter how far apart they went, the shadow of what they'd done together and what they destroyed would follow them forever. Because when greatness burns too hot, it doesn't fade. It explodes. For years, the world saw only the conflict, the interviews, the jabs, the tension on the bench, the icy stares, the unspoken war for control of the Lakers dynasty. But beneath the headlines and highlight reels, the truth was far more complex and far more human. At its core, the rivalry between Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant was not just about ego or control. It was about greatness and the cost of achieving it. Two once-in-a-generation talents, two towering personalities, two men who both wanted to be the best, and just happened to wear the same jersey at the same time. Shaq needed Kobe. Kobe needed Shaq. And deep down, both of them always knew it. But pride, that most blinding of emotions, wouldn't let them admit it. Not then. Not while the cameras were rolling, not while the lights were on and the championships were stacking. To acknowledge how much they needed one another would have felt like surrender. So instead, they fought. Through the media, through body language, through silence. They were competitors, but also mirrors. Each man reflected the other's insecurities. For Shaq, Kobe represented the future, fast, hungry, and unwilling to bow to seniority. For Kobe, Shaq was the obstacle, the immovable giant standing between him and full ownership of his legacy. But time has a way of revealing what youth tries to hide. And after the breakup, after Shaq left, after the dynasty crumbled, both men matured, separately, on different coasts, carrying the weight of what they'd built and destroyed together. Kobe went through years of loneliness and loss, fighting to rebuild the Lakers, earning 2 more titles in 2009 and 2010 without Shaq. Shaq won 1 more ring in 2006 with Dwayne Wade, proving he could still dominate in a different uniform, but never again reaching the heights he had in purple and gold. And then came 2009. Kobe won his 4th championship, and for the first time, he didn't share the court with Shaq, but he couldn't celebrate without acknowledging the man who had helped build the foundation. It was during this period that Shaq and Kobe finally reunited publicly, not in a gym, not on a sideline, but on a TV soundstage, face-to-face, under studio lights, microphones on, egos lowered. They laughed about the fights, joked about their old jabs, relived the chaos, and for the first time, told the truth plainly. Without Shaq, I wouldn't have 3 rings, Kobe said. Without Kobe, I wouldn't have 3 Finals MVPs, Shaq replied. It wasn't just lip service. It was respect. Late, but real. Shaq called Kobe the best player he ever played with. Kobe acknowledged that Shaq's presence pushed him to work harder, compete deeper, and elevate himself beyond his limits. In those moments, you could see it. The rivalry had melted into something far more valuable, understanding. It was no longer about who was better. It was about what they had achieved together. And perhaps more importantly, what they had survived. In their own way, they forged each other. Kobe forced Shaq to sharpen his focus. Shaq forced Kobe to mature faster than any 18-year-old ever should. It wasn't always pretty. It was rarely healthy. But it was powerful. Because true greatness doesn't always come from harmony. Sometimes it's born in friction.
And while they had spent much of their prime trying to escape each other's shadow, by the end, they stood in the same light, as equals, as legends. The mutual respect didn't come with the rings. It came after the noise faded. It came with time. 3 championships, 4 NBA finals, years of dysfunction, moments of perfection, and one of the most unforgettable dynasties in the history of professional sports. The Shaq and Kobe Lakers weren't just a team. They were a cultural phenomenon. From 2000 to 2004, they didn't just define basketball. They defined an era. It was power and poetry, ego and excellence, friction and fire, chaos and legacy. They weren't the model of unity. They weren't the example of teamwork. But what they lacked in harmony, they made up for in sheer undeniable dominance. 3 NBA titles in a row, 4 trips to the finals in 5 seasons, and an impact that extended far beyond the hardwood. Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant didn't just win, they changed how we think about winning. They showed the world that greatness isn't always pretty. Sometimes it's brutal, messy, explosive. But when it works, it becomes legend. Shaq was the unstoppable force. Kobe, the immovable will. Together, they tore through the NBA with terrifying efficiency, dismantling dynasties, silencing critics, and rewriting narratives. They were lightning in a bottle, but the bottle was cracked. It was only a matter of time before the pressure shattered everything.
And yet, in the aftermath of their split, when tempers cooled and dust settled, the legacy remained. Because time has a way of reframing the past. We no longer just remember the fights. We remember the alley-oops, the fourth quarters, the playoff dominance, the parades through downtown L.A. We remember how unstoppable they were when they decided to fight together. They didn't love each other, but they respected each other's talent like no one else. And together they made history. Kobe went on to prove he could win without Shaq. Shaq went on to prove he could win without Kobe. But nothing ever replicated the magic they created together. Their individual legacies are extraordinary, but their shared legacy? That's where the mythology lives. It lives in the nightmares of defenders, in the echoes of a roaring Staples Center, in the countless highlight reels of lobs, dunks, and dagger jumpers, in the tears of celebration and the silence of the final breakup. They were not friends, they were not brothers, but they were the most dominant duo the game has ever seen. And in the end, that's what lasts. Because championships fade, stats are broken, but stories become legend. And the story of Shaq and Kobe, 2 men at war, bound by greatness, divided by ego, but united by history, will be told as long as basketball is played. That's legacy. That's immortality. That's Shaq and Kobe. At first glance, the story of Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant seems like a paradox, a tale of 2 men who could barely stand each other, yet managed to create one of the most dominant dynasties in NBA history. They were fire and gasoline, 2 forces that by themselves were dangerous, but together they were explosive. Their relationship was volatile, unpredictable, and often painful to watch. Arguments in the locker room, barbs in the media, power struggles on a scale rarely seen in professional sports. Yet from this chaos emerged something almost magical. Because Shaq and Kobe proved that winning doesn't require friendship. It doesn't require harmony.
It doesn't even require love. Sometimes what it takes is something far simpler and far more brutal. Respect. Respect for each other's talent. Respect for each other's drive. Respect for the fact that they were both willing to do whatever it took to win. And alongside that respect was an undeniable truth. Their combined talent was ruthless, unstoppable, game-changing. They tore through opponents with the force of a storm fueled not by camaraderie, but by competitive fire. This kind of tension, this kind of dysfunction is rarely sustainable. Most teams that clash like this implode long before they succeed. But Shaq and Kobe, they found a way to turn tension into triumph. They turned rivalry into results. They turned hatred into history. The Lakers of the Shaq-Kobe era weren't perfect. They were flawed, messy, controversial, but they were also legendary. Their story is proof that greatness doesn't always come wrapped in warm smiles and friendly pats on the back. Sometimes greatness is forged in the heat of conflict, in the clash of titans who refuse to back down. And that's what makes their legacy so compelling, so real. Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant will forever be remembered not just for the rings they won, but for the way they won them, as a team that couldn't stand each other, yet couldn't be stopped when they fought side by side. They showed the world that dysfunction can work, that tension can fuel excellence, that sometimes chaos creates greatness. The Shaq-Kobe Lakers will always be a living legend, a testament to the beautiful, brutal, and unforgettable power of conflict turned into victory. And in the end, that's the greatest lesson of all. If you're fascinated by legendary rivalries, behind-the-scenes locker room drama, and stories of generational greatness that shape the history of sports, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to smash that like button to show your support. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a deep dive into basketball's most iconic stories. And make sure to hit the notification bell to get alerted the moment we drop our next video. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us, who do you think was more important to the Lakers dynasty, Shaquille O'Neal or Kobe Bryant? Was it Shaq's unstoppable dominance in the paint or Kobe's relentless work ethic and killer instinct? And while you're at it, what other famous love-hate duos do you want us to explore next? Whether it's basketball, other sports, or even entertainment, the pairs who clashed off the court but conquered on it. Your thoughts and opinions fuel this community, so don't hold back. Jump into the conversation now.